Okay, so thank you very much, guys, for joining. As I say, this today's event is an interesting one with three great companies from the Yorkshire and Humber region, obviously covering 3 areas of cybersecurity. So everything from the human side right the way through the technical. Again, we're just going to have a few more interruptions while the last few people join. I hope you've all had a great day so far. Please, the way we tend to run these sessions, keep them as informal as you like. It's about actual information sharing and knowledge sharing. So please, if you've got any questions at any point, please do use the chat functionality. The 3 additional dots are relatively new to Google, but similar functionality to what you have on your Google Meets and your Zoom, allows us to run polls and ask questions and answers. So we will look at that throughout the course, but if you take yourself off mute, it's a bit of an open invitation for us to actually ask you a question, because we presume that's you wanting to speak as well. So 2 ways of getting in touch: take yourselves off mute and we'll come directly to you, but also if you use the polls and the chats functionality on the top right hand side of your screen. Okay. So just to also note that today's session is being recorded for those people that are unfortunately unable to make it, but also to be able to allow you to come back and reflect on some of the points that are raised today. In terms of the audience, we've got a real mixed bag of organisations, and hopefully you'll all be able to take something out of today's session that will hopefully make either yourself more secure online, your teams more secure, and ultimately increase the resilience of your businesses. So thank you very much for joining us today. Okay, so the presentation today is going to be broken down into the 3 areas. Myself talking about the human side of cybersecurity. So my name is Melanie Oldham. I'm CEO and founder of a company called Bob's Business, and we are a cyber education company that concentrate on securing the people at the heart of your organisation. So where possible, simplifying cybersecurity so that it can be absorbed and understood by most of the workforce, and we do that through storytelling and animation. Next, but following me, is going to be James Bully from Calder IT. James, do you want to quickly say hi and just a brief overview of your company and where you come from, please?
Hi, yeah, I'm James from Calder IT. We provide IT proactive support services for small to medium-sized businesses across the Yorkshire region. I've been doing this sort of stuff now for about 25 years.
Thank you, James.
Shall I automatically go next then,
yes,
to make it seamless?
Neil. So covering obviously once the first line of defence, the people, and then the technical defence. Hopefully, if anything else then goes on from there, what other cover have we got? So over to you, Neil.
Yeah, we're here where it all goes wrong. When it all goes wrong, that's where you need us. So my name's Neil Grimshaw. I'm a chartered insurance broker. I work for a company called Ravenhall Risk Solutions that I founded back in 2006. We're one of the few independent chartered insurance brokers left in the Yorkshire and Humberside region. So from a cyber insurance perspective, I did one of my thesis for my fellowship on cyber insurance, and fundamentally it's under purchase within businesses. So I'm here to tell you a little bit more about cyber insurance, how it can help you, what it can do, and fundamentally how it can be beneficial to your business when the human and the technical side doesn't quite complete the job.
Thank you very much, Neil. And Chris, don't worry. Again, we appreciate that these webinars are quite a chunk of time. So yeah, if you need to nip out, not a problem. As I say, the recordings will be available at a later date. So just a reminder to everybody that it has been recorded. But hopefully that's advantageous to you to be able to share with your teams and your colleagues at a later date. So they're the introductions, and without further ado, I'm going to launch straight into sort of the human side of cybersecurity and what the current situation is. So what we have in the market at the moment is things are really shifting and changing. And one of the things that, from a statistical point of view, that it's argued is that our own actions and behaviours are accountable for 95% of information security breaches. So there's that really common misconception that cybersecurity is really all technical, and it's a technical problem. And yes, we'll go on to talk about the technical controls you can put in place, but ultimately the biggest risk comes down to the human element and the human side of things. And of those human errors, human breaches, insider threat accounts for 66% of that, so which is, 2 huge statistics. And when we're talking insider threat, we're talking your employees, but we're also talking about other individuals that might have access to your systems, to your data. So that might be your suppliers, potentially your customers on your platforms, but also insider threat, I sort of of came up with an example earlier in the week when I was talking about, for me, insider threat this week has been my kids. I'm in the front of a car and all of a sudden I get the kids arguing in the background because they've managed to work out mum's password because they've been watching me all week during the half-term holiday and have managed to hack in and add their thumbprint, they're telling me. So you can imagine instant horror. But what I didn't do was think about, okay, what does that equate to in risk? And what that equated to is I just then angrily went onto my phone, changed my password, and didn't think about the consequences of being stuck in the middle of nowhere with no Wi-Fi signal. So my iPhone wasn't being backed up. I could not remember the password that I changed it to for love nor money. It was that secure in the heat of the moment. And there was no way that I could reset my phone because my data was absolutely maxed out. So 4 hours wasted on the phone to Apple. Long and short of it, I then just did a lost phone and reset, which is great if you then didn't have a virtual SIM, which meant that you then had to go and find an e-store in a location you didn't know and wait 5.5, 6 hours. So I lost in terms of productivity quite a lot. So that was my insider threat that particular day. Not great because I should be backing up. I shouldn't be sharing my password. So let that be a lesson to all of you that actually think about what is the level of threat, what is that insider risk before you take gut decisions to quickly change things in an instant. But what we do know is that of this 95% and this 66% of insider threats is that people can be the strongest defense without a shadow of a doubt from information and cybersecurity breaches. And in this real kind of changing current climate, it's really important that we embrace the people.
Hi, Maureen.
Good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, dynamite, thanks.
Could you put yourself up? It's okay, Steve, I can mute you, don't worry. So again, if anybody isn't muted, if I can ask that you mute yourselves, unless you have a question to raise. So we can really use ourselves and the people within our organisation as that frontline defenders, as that great source of strength, and that's what I'm briefly going to cover with you today. So what's happening in the world as we know it now? The environment is changing and behaviours that is spelt wrong is also changing. So what we have is we've got this shift from what is a very controlled work environment to us working from home. And yes, there's the physical controls that have changed, and I'll go on to those, and the technical side, but also our behaviour changes and how we feel, and we feel far more comfortable in our home environment. So potentially where we would have been a little bit more alert and a little bit more identifying risks and potential risks and the threat of risks, we tend to feel a little bit more comfortable in our home environment. So the way that we're looking at things, and as a rule, cybersecurity criminals, cyber criminals exploit our emotions. And what we've seen in recent news is the increase in number of attacks through phishing and social engineering around COVID, because this is something that's really emotional to us, of which is going to get a reaction and response. Obviously, the increase at the moment, you'll see the next shift of scams coming through, looking at gift card fraud, for example. And again, it's because what we're trying to do is we can't get out to the shops, we can't buy, so can we buy gift cards online? And we're all shifting to that. So, we've got these sort of really shifting behaviours that change, but a lot of them powered by emotions. And I think this is something that's really powerful, that from a technical point of view isn't ever covered as to what risks are we because of what we're powered by being our emotions. So in terms of the environment and what is changing, we have a bit of this scenario. We've got a load of people working from home and computer says no. Where we used to have somebody within the office environment that if computer said, no, you can't do it, there'd be that certain sense check where you'd look, can I really do it? Should I really be doing this? Whereas actually there's nobody looking over your shoulder. There's nobody watching you. And given a little bit of time and a little bit of that word that I can't say, where you go and do something off your own back. If anybody else wants to step in, please do. Using your own initiative, you can go in and change your controls and your settings. And we're a little bit more risky. We're also using a lot more of our own personal devices as well. So this kind of computer says no isn't necessarily a consistent thing that's happening at the moment. We're kind of bypassing that. There are three main fundamental things that has happened as an impact of COVID, and this is why the human side and insider risk has been predicted as being one of the main focuses for information security professionals and organisations by the analysts for next year. And that's because we've got this distributed workforce who are now off the network or outside of the network, so they've not got to go through the same controls to get into the system. In some organisations that have really good technical controls tend to be the larger organisations than the small ones. Then there may be things like VPNs, virtual private networks, that are put in place, but actually that slows down potentially already slow internet within organizations, so people are bypassing that. You've got that reduced visibility, so where somebody might be looking over your shoulder and seeing what you're doing, or your colleague checking, well, why are you really sending that file that way? You've not got that same level of visibility. And as I mentioned also, previously, greater autonomy. We think we can, we can fix this, we can find a solution. So this distributed workforce is a real problem for organizations and businesses, and it's only expected to get far worse. Increase of collaboration tools. Collaboration tools, Slack, Teams, Google Drive, all these things are brilliant. What it's meaning is actually we're probably far more efficient now than we ever were, because we can all get on there, share the documents. But what that means is these documents are so much easier to access as well, which means they're so much easier to access, so much easier to share. So the visibility that we had and control over our company information has also minimized. And unless we find the technical controls in place, then there's no means to actually to be able to see where the flow of information is happening, particularly within small organizations that have less technical controls. So all this increased sharing and collaboration tools are happening, which is great, because we want to share, we want to get the best out of our teams. And to be fair, all these breaches and things that happen don't particularly happen because of malicious intent. It happens because people wanting to do their job do it far quicker and far faster, and therefore circumnavigating those controls. The other element that's happening is this cultural shift, and it's potentially blamed on the generation X and Y, or Y and Z as it is, and we don't have the same basically, I suppose, commitment to an organization that historically that we had. So where we used to have employees in organizations that used to be there for a long time, some of the new generations coming in will typically only stay with an organization for career progression purposes for about 3 years. So therefore they're moving, and when they're moving, they're thinking about their career enhancements and where it's going. And they also have this false entitlement that actually that things that they create and do, they're proud of and they're theirs. And in a lot of organizations, people don't set out and explain exactly what controls should be in place, so or what the boundaries are. So for example, you have developers that are creating software and they're really proud of that software, so they want to take it with them, but it's making sure that actually that software that you've developed and you've created, yes, you've built, but it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the organization. The sales database that you've created as a salesperson, yeah, you've made some great contacts on LinkedIn. You've basically gone out there and you've built the business for us, but they're not your contacts to then take to the next organization. And these are all things that are happening a lot more quicker. Our connections that we have via social media, so many more of them. So it's just being mindful of all these things and this shift in behaviors that's putting our organizations increasingly at risk. But the good news about all this is, again, people powered by their emotions, they generally want to do a good job, and they're not necessarily doing any of this out of malicious intent. So it's thinking about how we sort of embrace this and encourage people to actually get recognition for their work, but also understand where the boundaries lie. And that's deepened in really good and positive communications. The other thing just on that cultural shift is uncertainty and doubt, is that these are really difficult times. They're really challenging times, and we don't know and we can't necessarily see the financial pressures or the family pressures that an individual might be under that we potentially could see the visibility of when we've got a shared office environment. So it's really important that there's an understanding as to what might be the underlying issues behind what might make somebody a fraudulent employee who tries to take money from the business, or make somebody, as say, a begrudging employee because they've done some work, but they've not had the same level of recognition for the work that they've done. All these sort of things play a real important part in cybersecurity, which is what makes our data a little bit more vulnerable. To be able to shift and change a culture, there is sort of 5 key things to be thinking of, and these will be my sort of top areas to think about how you focus and concentrate cyber activities. And it's about creating the right environment, so making sure that it's supportive, transparent, and encouraging and inclusive. Again, as I say, by giving people the recognition and the space to talk about their achievements and recognizing those is really important. Really good communications, making sure that you're keeping things as simple as possible, stripping of anything technical jargon. Right now, it's not necessary from a cybersecurity point of view to over jargonize it. Just talk about the actions that you want people to do slightly differently. Make sure that you're giving information in a format that is engaging. More than anything, I think one of the things is we have information overload. So think about what are the highest level risks to you, and really focus on delivering that message in a way that's really engaging. The reason we are so susceptible to risk is because we have all these inherent bad habits, these habits of doing things a particular way, and that's why it's quite difficult to change. So the problems we have around password management and people writing down passwords or using the same password is because they've done them since, for as long as we can possibly remember, and therefore shifting and changing those behaviors is really difficult. But anything is possible. Any of you that have tried a sport or tried to do anything in lockdown, it's about the repetition and doing it again. So think about, from an organizational point of view, what are your biggest risks when it comes to those three areas around collaboration tools, around information sharing, around passwords. What is it that's the biggest risk to you? What is likely to happen to your business as a result of this distributed workforce that's going to cause a potential cybersecurity breach or risk? And then looking at this collaboration in the sense that get people to think about the shared responsibility, and that everyone within the organization is responsible for cybersecurity. As I say, 95% cybersecurity breaches are a result of the behaviors and habits that we have, of which 66% of people who have direct access to your systems, who are trusted individuals. So working with them, being transparent with them, and talking with them about what you're trying to implement and how is really, really, really fundamental. There's lots that I've covered in that session, and say I'm conscious that we've got 3 sections to get through and some Q&A. So my final point I would sort of touch on and leave on is changing cultures is the small changes that make a big difference. Do one thing and do it really, really well, and good behavior breeds and make it habit. So my suggestion would be, think of the 5 main controls, some of which I think James is going to touch on, which is around passwords, 2-factor authentication, and then we've got backing up of information, viruses, all covered in the NCSC top 5. Do one, concentrate it, communicate it, and work out how you're going to do it well, and then move on. How's that for a bit of a lineup for you, James? I'll hand over to you now, if that's okay. If there's any questions, then please do put them in chat, and I'll look to answer them.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Melanie. That was very informative, and it's great presentation. So over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to provide some tips on how to reduce your risk concerning cyber threats. This isn't a be all and end all, and if you do all of these, then everything's nailed on. I could go on for hours on this subject and various of the bits and pieces. So we'll start off with email security, phishing, spam, spoofing, and ways to reduce your exposure. Bogus emails remain one of the largest threats to business outside of the sort of internal staff threats and mistakes. Cyber criminals can send thousands of emails a second to unsuspecting parties. It only takes one person clicking on a link or an attachment to affect a machine and cause disruption to a service or business. The most effective spam phishing email campaigns are run as such. You've got organizations out there who are basically trying to steal your data and either use it fraudulently or use it for other gains. These sorts of spam and phishing emails will usually have a link or an attachment with some form of urgency, and such emails may come from HMRC. Click here to receive your tax rebate. From DHL, your package is ready for collection. From Microsoft, please update your login details. If you click on any of these links, you are giving a cyber criminal another way into your systems. There's a number of ways to reduce the risk of becoming a victim to this type of cybercrime. Look to implement an antivirus application that includes anti-spam filters. For larger organizations, deploy dedicated anti-spam filtering systems that sit outside of your organization's network, ensuring emails are checked before they enter your organization. Spoofed emails that either claim to be sent from someone within your own organization or from a known supplier requesting an urgent invoice to be paid to a different bank account than normal. This type of attack is becoming more common, and payments can range from a few £100s to millions of pounds, which was a reported case for a Premiership football team last year. Either way, these sums have a negative impact on any size of business. There's some simple ways to help reduce this risk. Add a banner to the top of emails that are received from outside your organisation, such as the one highlighted in yellow and red on the slide. These alert your staff to the fact that this is actually an external email. Do you trust where this email has come from? Are you happy to open the link or open the attachment or follow the link? Ensure you have some of the other email basics covered. Check your own email records held by your domain name services record holder. As a minimum, this should include a sender policy framework or SPF record. This record tells the receiving email server the valid source addresses where the email should have originated from. If you don't have an SPF record for your domain, emails that you send are more likely to be rejected by other people's spam filters. To reduce the risk of emails that appear to be spoofed from someone within inside your organization, add a domain keys identifier record or a DKIM record. This is a mechanism that proves internally and externally that you are who you say you are and that you are sending that email. And then a final step is to add a domain-based message authentication reporting and confirmance or DMARC record. The DMARC record ties the SPF and a DKIM record together, and it basically provides analysis on where emails have been sent from your organization. You may have a server sat down in your basement that's responsible for sending all of your emails. But then if this report says that, well, actually someone from China is also sending emails on your behalf, then that's something that you would need to investigate further.
Can I just ask a question on that, James? So just with regard to this, DMARC is something that's really, really complex, and a lot of organizations might turn around and say, well, you know, where does this sit? Just from a point of view, is this something that is a responsibility of your outsourced tech team that you'd expect them to know? And you said you did a little bit of research on some of the registrations for today. What were the main findings there?
Yeah, so it's if you're a large organization, then it's something that an internal tech team would pick up, or the person responsible for email. But for sort of smaller organizations where they outsource their IT, then absolutely this is something that the outsourcers can pick up on. There's a handy tool called mxtoolbox.com where you can actually check your own settings for this sort of thing. I did a quick look at the attendees list for today, and for organizations that have got their own domain name rather than registering with a Gmail or a Yahoo account, 20% of the domains didn't have a valid SPF record. So there's a good chance that for those organizations, their emails are not necessarily reaching all of their intended recipients. And 60% of the records didn't have a proper DMARC record set up. So yeah, that's a little bit of sort of information that's pertinent to who we're actually talking to and who's on this call today, because there's definitely people who should review where they are with their own sort of security on that side of things. So two-factor authentication and password hygiene, keeping the keys to your data secure. So two-factor authentication protects against account takeover, fraudulent transactions, unauthorized account access, and account hijacking. In each case, some form of secondary challenge is requested before you can log into a service. So everyone's got a user account and password. these can be compromised. And the idea behind two-factor authentication is when you go and log into your banking account or your email account, it's having something else that, all right, you've got the password, but that could have been bought from the dark web. You then need to validate that you've got a mobile device or some token system that confirms that you are definitely who you are. So breach analysis last year by a National Cybercrime and Security Centre found that over 23 million victims' accounts still used 123456 as their account password. QWERTY's in there with 3.6 million, and as you can see, there's the name Ashley was the highest name, and the highest Premiership club was Liverpool. So many people use the same username and password across multiple accounts. Compromise one account leads to other accounts being compromised. So if someone got your Facebook account and you use that Facebook account for your email, that gets them into another system. From there, they can start requesting password resets on banking accounts. They can create forwarding rules that means emails that you receive are then sent out of your organization without you even knowing it's happening. So to reduce the risk, just go on to the next slide, please. Right, I think we're, right, okay. So to just go on to the next one, Mel. I think the slides disappeared by the looks of it. So yeah, go back a couple more. Right, okay, we'll stay on that one. So to reduce the risk, where possible, switch on two-factor authentication for all your apps and accounts. So this should include stuff like WhatsApp, Facebook, email apps. The chances are your banking apps already got that in place. One reason why it is important to have it on your email, as I've sort of alluded to, is if someone compromises that account, then from there they can set up forwarding rules. We've seen this recently with a couple of prospects that we've been working with, where their domain registrar GoDaddy, who was compromised, I think March, April time this year, where millions of user accounts records were stolen. And we've had two prospects in the last 3 weeks where GoDaddy's been the ISP. The people haven't used two-factor authentication for their email accounts. Their email accounts have been hacked. They've then had forwarding rules applied to those accounts, which has enabled either sort of emails to go missing or information to be compromised. So 2FA, wherever you can, switch it on. Ensure your password isn't...
Sorry, there's a quick poll, James. If anybody wants to click on polls and just answer the question, a couple of questions that appear in there, they will be appearing throughout the session. Just, have you ever been phished, and do you have 2FA on all your online accounts, just to get a gauge as to whether or not everybody here has. There's a lot of say online accounts, LinkedIn, your Facebooks. Do you have it on all of them? And if not, sort of why not? I guess is one of the questions you can respond to in the chat functionality.
Yeah, thank you. Ensure your password is a minimum of 10 characters. NCSC sort of say 8's an absolute minimum, but we would always sort of, well, go a little bit further than that with sort of 10. Consider using 4 letter words. It's a lot harder to compromise, because if you've got four letter words that are random words, such as red lorry, blue lorry, that's not a sort of a well-known phrase. That's not your pet or your mother's maiden name or your date of birth or something like that, which is, people do use that sort of information for passwords, but it is also easily accessible even through sort of Facebook and sort of trawling who you are and your background. don't use the same password on multiple accounts. I think in the past we've all been guilty of that. I'll put my hand up, and yeah, up until probably 4 or 5 years ago, I probably had 2 passwords that I would rotate around various different accounts and stuff. I now employ like a password management tool, and because of that, I have one complex password that I have to remember, but then the rest of them are secured within that application. So there's a few around for that. There's Google Chrome's got one built in, so has Edge. And then there's a few others like LastPass, Dashlane's another good one. But there's quite a few where you can go online and sort of pull recommendations for those. Change default passwords for devices that you purchase as well. So your broadband router that's been supplied by BT or Virgin, stuff like smart TVs, IoT devices, they've all got the ability to report to somewhere else, and it's worth sort of resetting passwords on those things. Protect your perimeter. To better understand the importance of a firewall, first we need to consider the role of the firewall. Whilst it is to stop people getting to your data or being able to infect your machine with malicious code, the firewall does this by inspecting every packet of information that passes through it. Web traffic and content that is downloaded from a website forms a major part of the traffic that needs to be inspected. Over the last 5 years, the volume of traffic passing across the internet has changed from unsecured, so HTTP, to encrypted traffic, HTTPS. The latest figures from Google suggest that over 90% of this traffic, of traffic that is accessed through a Chrome browser, is now HTTPS encrypted, compared to around 50% 5 years ago. This is great news for keeping your end-to-end traffic secure, but not so great if the firewall needs to be able to inspect the traffic. Websites supporting HTTPS, which means they should be secure. So this is where you get the little green padlock in your browser, have been compromised, which allows the unsuspecting victim to download malicious code that has gone on to disrupt business without the traffic being inspected by the firewall. So think of your firewall as your front door into your business. The firewall's job is to create a physical barrier preventing people from accessing your building without permission. Firewalls, like front doors, come in various shapes and sizes, ranging from a basic low-cost entry model to next-generation devices supporting multiple detection features. So a next-generation firewall, which we'll sort of talk more about, could be considered as a solid steel door. The door is a visible deterrent that deters all but the most skilled criminal. If they get through the first door, there might be a porch with a second internal door and then an alarm system to disable. These systems offer a multi-layered approach to securing your property. A next generation firewall works in the same way. If you compromise the first layer of protection, then there are multiple layers of protection behind the first to disable, giving the business time to react. A next generation firewall will also inspect the secure like HTTPS traffic and make decisions on whether to allow it into the network or not. So where you have members of staff working from home and connecting to your office to access company data, ensure they're using a VPN or virtual private network. This ensures that data being sent and received is encrypted. So legacy and basic firewalls, these are devices which are typically supplied with your internet connections, such as your Virgin Media Box, your BT Smart Hub. These should be considered as a door with a wooden frame. The lower half's a solid wooden panel, the top half's frosted glass. It'll keep the weather out, but if you wanted to break through, you could do so with a brick. A basic firewall generally doesn't have the same level of the capabilities to inspect HTTPS traffic, which is, as I sort of said, the bulk of traffic that's now out there on the internet. So in instances where you are running a basic firewall, consider doing something where you're running a DNS content filter. And what this will do for you is when you visit a website, before you actually get to the site, it'll do a lookup and determine whether that site is safe to access or not. And in cases where a site has been compromised or isn't safe, it will alert you before you try and connect to it. The next point to consider is types of traffic that is allowed to enter your network. If you have an email server at your office that is set up to allow inbound emails to be received direct to your organization's server, this traffic needs to pass through the firewall. And we would always recommend that your traffic goes through a spam filter, and then only that spam filter is allowed to talk to the server, which reduces your sort of your threat levels. With COVID and the rush for organisations to get their staff working from home, we have seen it where organisations have enabled something called remote desktop protocol. This basically allows anyone on the internet to connect directly to your internal servers. This threat has increased by 37% alone this year with attacks that have used this vector. If you need to be able to access servers from remote locations or need to use remote desktop, then what we would always recommend is you have people VPNing into the organization, and then from there they access the servers using RDP. It just means that you're opening less ports up to the internet. Ultimately, the less ports you open up, the safer your organization is.
James, can I just ask you a quick question on that? So just with regards to accessing the servers and networks, do you find that with a lot of organizations, especially, we've got a lot of small organizations registered, that a lot of this is, I suppose, alleviated by the use of the cloud-based collaboration platforms, and therefore not as much of an issue? Or, is there a need for anybody to be remoting on? And also, again, what, I guess, just feedback as to the commonality of these threats amongst small businesses.
Yeah, and I think it depends on how the organisation works. It's if you've got a manufacturing organisation that may have maybe a dozen or more sort of members of staff, then they may have that requirement to access internal systems, because they may have like their account systems and their CAD systems may not be online systems. And we see a real mix of this where an organization is a young organization and they are predominantly cloud-based. So they'll be using sort of Office 365, and they might be using Xero and sort of Microsoft SharePoint and OneDrive. They may just have a basic firewall that's sort of software based and built into the antivirus, or just sort of relying on some of the other technologies. But certainly the larger sort of SMEs would normally have some sort of firewalls and some connectivity into an organization.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the points that I raised earlier then, just on the chat, if anybody saw it, is that there's been a spike of end users turning off their firewall. Why they feel they need to turn off their firewall on their Windows PCs is an unknown, but there has been a spike in it. And again, that's things to be mindful of, that the traffic between them obviously going onto the cloud-based platforms and systems is potentially then vulnerable. So that's just the sort of thing you might want to look at from a smaller business perspective. I think there was a couple of in there as well, just on the 2FA backup really as well, that was just asking, are there any threats in terms of accessing backup if you lose your 2FA? And my viewpoint on this would always have a backup to your 2FA. So if you're using Google Authenticate, maybe have it on your iPad as well as your iPhone, but just obviously you then have to think of the security of those devices. Again.
And I think there's other bits around there as well. It's normally when you set up a 2FA system, there'll normally be some sort of other system that you can use to, if you need to recover your passwords. So with sort of Microsoft, they've got there's normally two ways of, if you're using like the Microsoft Authenticator app, you can either authenticate against a mobile number or an email address. So 2FA, and if you're using like the 2FA and sort of password tools, then most of those have a secondary way that you can access your data if things go pear-shaped.
I think there's potentially going to be a conversation after this about how secure texts are for 2FA, but we can pick that up at the end if that's okay. Thank you, James.
Yeah, okay. So antivirus and keeping software up to date. New cyber threats are being created all the time. Wherever possible, ensure your IT systems have antivirus applications installed. Well-known antivirus vendors include Avast, AVG, ESEX, Bursky, McAfee, Sophos, and there are other vendors out there as well. Most of the vendor products will offer similar sort of core feature sets. From a business perspective, find a vendor that covers all the equipment that your organization runs, such as Windows-based computers, Android tablets, smartphones, Apple iOS devices. So Android and Apple devices are less obvious devices to protect, and are less publicized for being infected. However, it does happen. There have been cases where mobiles have been infected with malware and data stolen. In some cases, the actual sort of malware is downloaded straight from Google App Store. Apple are a lot tighter on this because of the way that they prevent you from downloading unsecurity signed apps unless you sort of jailbreak your phone. So keeping software up to date. Due to the size and complexity of operating systems and applications, it isn't always possible to test every line of code before it's released into production. When issues arise, the vendors will release a software update to enable businesses to try and keep on top of their own patch management. Microsoft release all of their updates on Patch Tuesday. Without fail, on the second Tuesday of the month, Microsoft will release upwards of 30 to 40 patches. So which are security fixes security patches and bug fixes for their products. The patches keep your software working, but they also fix security holes that have been exposed. Usually you'll also find that these new patches will also generate new bugs which then need patching, and the cycle never ends. So who remembers WannaCry? WannaCry was a ransomware infection that infected large parts of the NHS IT systems in 2017. The majority of the machines that were infected were running versions of Microsoft Windows that was still supported and still being patched. It was just the case that the software hadn't been updated, allowing the bug to exploit the computers that were infected. So we would always recommend sort of patching machines within 14 days of release of any updates. If you're a Cyber Essentials accredited organisation and have machines running unsupported software, such as those listed on the slide, you're likely to fail your next Cyber Essentials renewal, as they're really sort of tightening up on that side of things. And you may also find that your cyber insurance isn't validated anymore, because you're running software that's X numbers of years out of date, that hasn't been updated or patched. There's bugs that are known, that are out there, and if you get hit with one of those bugs, then you might be on your own on that one. So we're nearly there. So backup and recovery. When all else fails, being confident you can recover from a disaster. So far, everything I've talked about has been about managing cyber risk. However, should a disaster occur, such as cyber, fire, flood, hardware failure, having a recovery strategy is equally important. To implement a successful recovery strategy, you need to understand the following. What data is critical to your business to enable it to run, such as emails, your documents, your databases, which may be used for accounting systems or for product planning or distributing of services. Where is the data being held? File and email servers on premise, hosted Sage 50, something sat on an accountant's PC, in Google G Suite or Microsoft 365. All of these locations have one thing in common. Unless you've put a system in place, they are not being backed up. Microsoft and Google's stance on data that's held in their data centers, such as G Suite and Office 365, your data is your responsibility. What's your recovery time objective? Realistically, how long can you be without your data before it has a negative impact on your business? A few hours, a few days? What is your recovery point objective? How much data can you afford to lose without data loss having a negative impact on your business? So if you're a bank, if you were without transactions from a few seconds prior to a disaster, then that may have a massive impact on your business. If you're, I don't know, if you're a builder or a plumber and you lose emails from the last 24 hours, that's probably not going to cause you too many issues, but it's still something to understand. Once you have all this information, you can deploy a backup solution. The rule of thumb for securing your data is follow the 3-2-1 rule. Simply put, keep at least 3 copies of your data, primary working copy and 2 backup copies. Use 2 different media types for backup, such as tape, removable storage or NAS storage. Have at least 1 off-site copy, a backup to a cloud, or taking removable media off-site, such as tape or RDX devices. Make sure those devices are encrypted. Finally, ensure that you document any regular. Finally, ensure you've a disaster recovery plan that you can follow, which you test at least once a year, or if there's any significant changes within your environment. So, final slide. So the human touch. This presentation has covered what we would consider to be some of the main points around IT data security. As I said at the start, this is by no means a definitive list, and there are numerous other steps that should be taken that we've not covered today. When we don't get it right through staff awareness training or hardware, software solutions, having the right cyber insurance is a final safety net for your business. And with that, I would like to hand over to Neil.
Thank you very much. Cheers, James. Thanks for that. Like I say, going over what Melanie and James have already talked to you about is critical risk management protocols for your business before the event. Risk management, same kind of activity as setting an alarm, locking a door, installing a CCTV system, and all those things that we do naturally for physical protection of our premises and our assets. So going over, how to balance that human interaction, and also how to deal with the aspects of what you can physically do with your systems is really important, and all of which is to be expected to be done by a diligent business. So I'm going to talk to you about what happens after the event, and the poll's just been raised in the background there if you want to have a quick look at that. Do you have cyber insurance? Now, the actual answer to this is that only about 13% of businesses have cyber insurance, which is a remarkably low number. And as I go about my day-to-day business as an insurance broker, I notice that 13% seems high to me in general. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the products. So over the next 2 hours, I'm going to explain to you, not 2 hours really, we'll only do about 20 minutes or so at the most. But I explain to you about what cyber insurance does and some of the things that you need to think about when you're understanding what your cyber risk is. So we'll click on what is cyber insurance. Well, it's insurance that covers losses relating to damage to or loss of information from IT systems and networks. Very simple. Very straightforward. None of that's covered under your normal physical insurance that you buy over the course of a working day. So you've no cover for loss of data or damage to systems through cyber-related means. So we'll split it down into two sections, but first I want to share with you some of the headlines that get raised and we've seen over the course of the last years, and why cyber insurance needs to be more at the forefront of SME businesses across the country, never mind just our esteemed region of Yorkshire and Humberside. So obviously, we've all seen these headlines. We could list quite easily the types of companies that have seen those breaches over the course of the last few months. And obviously, from our perspective, the ones that stick out for me for the last few years were Sony and TalkTalk, Dropbox, LinkedIn over the last few years as well. And if you go on any of those websites that are available, so there's have I been pwned? Is that how you say it, James? I apologize sincerely if I've got it wrong, but you can see on there probably most of us have been involved in some of those breaches over the last few months and years. So from that perspective, it really does underline that that cyber insurance isn't just for big companies, it's for small companies too. And the cost of cyber insurance has come down dramatically over the last few years. And as a result, it makes it more accessible for all of us to become part of our normal standard purchasing of insurance annually. So if you haven't spoken to your own insurance broker about cyber insurance, please do. And if it feels like they don't know what they're talking about, please speak to me. So feel free to do that. So I'm just going to explain to you a little bit of an outline here of whether you need cyber insurance. So follow this with me if you don't mind. This is my picture of a lovely picturesque lakeside village bookshop. People only ever go in there and they pay cash. They don't have a card machine. There's no connectivity to the internet. They don't use anything like that. All it is cash over the counter, go in and browse, and that's that. These guys do not need cyber insurance. They've got no connectivity to the outside world, no digital footprint in any way, shape, or form. So if we click on this, we'll see it evolve over the course of its development from a digital perspective. So first and foremost, it starts taking payments using a chip and pin machine of some description. And once it starts doing that, it's creating a connectivity to the outside world, whether that be through 3G or through a telephone line or whatever it is. So if we could click through, that'd be wonderful. And then the next step that the business takes is that they start using emails to communicate. They buy themselves a nice little iPad or an iPhone and whatnot and start talking to customers, making inquiries with the outside world. Then they start using social media, using their smartphone or their new laptop, shiny iPad that they've bought. There we go. It says technological lag, I'm pretty sure. There we go, beautiful. Using social media. And basically, as they use social media, they create a bigger footprint with the outside world from a digital perspective, and something that creates effectively a log of their activity as well at the same time. Next step is it makes it easier because they're in the middle of nowhere and all the bank branches in their village have closed. They start banking online and using either a smartphone or their devices to do their day-to-day banking. And with that shiny new computer they bought and James Bully's exceptional IT skills, they've managed to start collating all of their stock into some form of EPOS and stock database in the background. Next step is to store all of that customer data into that same system, and then pop all that data that they've just collated up into the cloud. And all of a sudden, it's really easy for them to take the next step and set up a Shopify or an Etsy style website. And all of a sudden, they're an e-commerce organization that's gone from having no cyber footprint whatsoever or to having a footprint in the same way that the likes of Amazon has, for instance, just on obviously a much smaller scale. You can all see here those 8 interactions with that particular business that we see as being relatively straightforward things we all do have created the need for some form of cyber or digital insurance. Is that all right? We see a nodding head or two. A couple that are dropping off to sleep. I apologise for that, but I'll try and speak louder at random intervals. So cyber insurance is really straightforward. It splits itself down into 2 separate areas. There's our first party cover, which is just like insuring buildings or contents or stock or something like that. That's the loss of things that we could face ourselves as an organisation. So the bits where we're out of pocket ourselves as a business. So that's things like loss or damage to digital assets, Business interruption, we talked about, James talked about lead times and getting back up on live time following some form of cyber event. And if you also notice, we use in the insurance the phrase cyber event rather than cyber attack, because not all cyber events are malicious or from the outside world. You know, some of them are just mistakes. Some of them are failures of systems or failures of hardware. So, so we talk about them as cyber events. But if you had a cyber event, how much money would you lose because of the time that you're not able to use that database, that system, that e-commerce website? And obviously, during that period of time, cyber insurance can cover your loss of profit as a result of some form of cyber event whilst you recover from that. It can cover cyber extortion. So for instance, if you end up with that WannaCry virus James talked about, and you end up in a situation where you're being demanded some Bitcoin normally, I mean, I don't keep any of that lying around the house, luckily. But if you find yourself in that situation, you can rely on your insurers to help you either get yourself out of that mess or any losses relating from that extortion event. Customer notification expense is really interesting. It's something that people generally don't think about. Nowadays, under GDPR and the Data Protection Act 2018, we find ourselves in a situation where we are obligated in the event of some form of data breach to report that matter to the Information Commissioner. If they do, we're then at their mercy to follow what their instructions are next. So, for instance, think about the number of data records that you've got within your own organisation. You know, within ours, that's a significant number. It's probably a few thousand, probably verging on 10,000 data records. So, in the unlikely event that that data was breached to the outside world, what would happen next? What would happen if the Information Commissioner turned around to you and said, I want you to write to every single one of your data records that's been exposed and tell them what's happened and where to go? And you say, right, we're in a digital world. Can we not email them? No, we want you to write. So nowadays, a letter doesn't cost any kind of less really than a pound a go by the time you've added postage to a piece of paper and printed it and popped it in an envelope and gone up to the post office and popped it in there. So if you've got 10,000 data records and a circa £10,000 spend to write to every single one of those data records. So all of a sudden, those customer notification expenses become a big obligation to our organizations in the event of there being any form of breach or cyber event. So cyber insurance can cover that too as well at the same time. So it's worth doing that little exercise and having to think about how many data records that you've got within your organization and just working out that alone, is it worth having some cyber insurance for, regardless of the other stuff that I'm wowing and dazzling you with. The reputational damage is also an issue for that. I'm not quite there yet. If you want to just hop back, thank you very much. So a lot of these policies cover PR, disaster recovery and crisis containment costs. So what would you do if your business had a situation where there's a cyber event? What would happen if that got into the public domain? How would you manage your own reputation? And a lot of cyber policies have this capability in the background as well. And then there's obviously the theft of money or digital assets. We can include crime cover in lots of cyber policies to cover things for like social engineering losses and situations where, you know, invoices have been tampered with and payments have gone astray as a result of cyber crime and cyber related events. So then the other part of insurance is the third party aspect. So if you want to just flick over there, we'll talk about third party. And just in the same way you talk about public liability and employers' liability in your own insurance programs that you buy for physical insurance, third-party insurance covers the losses that you, the negligence that you owe, the duty of care you owe to third parties. It might be customers, it might be employees, it might be suppliers, it could be anybody, but anybody that's not you. So basically, your liabilities to third parties in general. And that will cover things like security and privacy breaches and any costs associated with that. Dealing with any claims that come your way for multimedia liability or defamation or breach of privacy or negligence. And just to bring some of those to life, you know, that could be using somebody's intellectual property or an image or something along those lines on your social media by accident, and then receiving some form of court summons or demand for compensation as a result of breaching someone's copyright. And it could be denial of access. So for instance, if you have customers that log into your system and they do their job by logging into your system, what happens if that system's not available for them? What would they lose some money, and could they possibly try and recover that outlay from you within contract or legal tort liability to be able to say, actually, we've not been able to earn £5,000 this month, and as a result, because it was your system that caused that loss, we're coming to you for it. So they're the kind of things that cyber insurance covers from a third party perspective. And I think it's important to point out that these are all things that cyber insurance can cover. There's no such thing as a cyber insurance policy that's best to market. There's no such thing as a cyber insurance policy that's the same as another cyber insurance policy. It's all about really understanding what's important to you and then allowing somebody that knows what they're doing from an insurance broking perspective to be able to go out there and find a policy that fits you and your budget and your needs. Okay, so how to buy cyber insurance, I think, is up next. Most importantly, speak to a broker. Brokers are overall generally bad at explaining these types of products because they are new and they're scary and whatnot. And it's our responsibility, in my opinion, as professional advisors on that front, to be able to highlight these things to our clients and make them understand that the cover's available and what it does and how it can benefit them. And then, you know, to a certain extent, we're handing ourselves over to market forces as to whether people take them up. And a lot of the time, economics, particularly when things are difficult like they are at the moment. So make sure you speak to a broker. Brokers can find you a best product for you, and it doesn't have to, there's no such thing as a catch-all product. So ensure your broker's got some expertise. Ensure they sound like they know what they're talking about. And if they try and offer you a product that they offer to every single one of their customers and only provide one cyber insurance product, they do not know what they're talking about. So please beware of that. If you ask a broker, you know, how many cyber products do you provide, and they say just the one, avoid that broker. Because that is not something that is possible to be driven in the current market, because the products vary so differently and all have so many different plus and minus points that there's no such thing as a one size fits all. Don't be forced into a huge cost, and consider your limits of indemnity. You know, just because you turn over £10 million doesn't mean you need a £10 million limit of indemnity. How many cyber insurance claims have you had in the past few years before you bought insurance? Most people will say none. And as a result, you know, having a cover at £100,000 or £500,000 as a business might well be, you know, more than enough just to get you into the habit of having cyber insurance being part of your insurance program over the course of the next few years. And look at that annually and see about whether you should increase it. And, you know, it all depends on cost a lot of the time. But don't be forced into thinking that you need millions and millions of pounds from the start. You know, start somewhere. Something's better than nothing. And it's not like normal insurance where there's an average clause applied. If you've got a £100,000 limit and you end up with a £120,000 claim, then, you know, fundamentally you're in a situation where you've lost £20,000 rather than £120,000. So please don't be put off by having a smaller limit just to get you off the ground and running with some cyber insurance. Yeah, I think we've already covered all cyber insurance policies are not the same. So there's some major benefits of having a cyber insurance policy. Business continuity following a cyber event. First and foremost, it gives you a point of call to contact straight away to get immediate specialist advice in a crisis. What do I do next when my systems aren't working? And obviously there's the likes of professional advisors like James and other professional forensic crisis containment IT consultants out there in the world, but all of them charge. All the insurance companies that we tend to deal with have people retained to be able to go out there and be able to come and help you in a crisis as quickly as possible. And getting you back up and running quickly is the most important thing following a cyber event. There's the revenue protection aspect of being able to recover your business interruption if you've got that insured as well whilst your systems are down. You're going to recover faster if you've got somewhere to go to and somebody to project manage your recovery quickly. And as a result, cyber insurance provides those specialists and provides that financial resource to be able to put yourself back into the same position as you were before the event. It also helps you not be held to ransom and then held to ransom. This is as funny as this presentation gets. If you go and pick up the phone to one of those IT providers that are out there that are specialists in recovery, and they say, yeah, it's £2,000 for us to fix your system, Mr. Smith. And you say, and we'll be with you on Friday. And you say, well, it's actually Monday. So could you come tomorrow? Yes, we can, but it's going to be more. It's going to be double the price for us to come tomorrow. So don't get held to ransom and then held to ransom. Pause, await laughter. Everyone's on mute. Move on. Specialist immediate expertise in a crisis is the most important reason why even Melanie's left now. That's how bad insurance is to talk about throughout this process. So, right, with her not being there, I'm not sure that this is going to move forward, but yeah, let's hope it does, because there's only one slide left. Nope, it's not going to do that. So there's some pitfalls to look out for when you're buying insurance policies. Look at the court jurisdictions. Look at the geographical limits of the policy. Look at the claims-related entities exclusions, because they can be quite onerous. You don't want a policy that excludes the ability for your employees, for instance, to make a claim, because your employees probably have the most sensitive data that most businesses have on their systems. Look out for bodily injury and property damage exclusions, and it's really important that you try and get this to dovetail quite nicely with your physical insurance as well at the same time. So, I would always recommend having the same broker handle all of your insurance program. Yeah, there's also some overlaps that you can have with cyber insurance, with PI insurance, and some crime overlaps as well at the same time. So it's about understanding where your current portfolio of insurance sits against cyber insurance as well, because what you don't want to end up doing is paying twice for the same insurance, even though that will pay my mortgage off quicker. What's up next? Further help. Yes, if you need any further help with buying cyber insurance, you can contact the British Insurance Brokers Association. They'll help you find a nice, friendly local broker. Look out for a broker that's chartered, and they're always the best, in my opinion, at the very least. There's also the Association of British Insurers. They've got lots of resource available for small businesses online to be able to help them with buying cyber insurance and how it works. And also you can give us a call as well at the same time. And if this slide was on the right one, it would demonstrate our phone number and our website, and you'd be able to be pointed exactly to us if you so required. But furthermore than that, you can ask a question in the chat. Please feel free, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn. My name's Neil Grimshaw, and I'm the only Neil Grimshaw on LinkedIn with FCII after my name. So please feel free to find me and connect and ask any questions. It'd be great to hear from you all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Neil. Really appreciate that. And so just a couple of things there to be mindful of. Neil was saying about chatting to the companies, to the brokers, to find out what you need. There's three sort of key elements to that as well. Talk to the guys that are managing and implementing your tech, and obviously the ways that you can reduce your insurance is by putting in place the controls, the technical controls that were discussed, and sort of embarking on cyber essentials plus from the technical side, but then obviously also implementing staff awareness and education all sort of help to look at reducing those premiums. We've got we're on the Aviva trusted partner section as well, and they're doing that because they see how big a risk the human side and these controls really are, but ultimately if it's going to happen, the chance that's going to happen in the insurance is pivotal. So whilst we've got the last remaining moments, does anybody have any questions for myself or the other guys at all? Any questions, any feedback? Please take yourselves off mute if you want to chip in and ask anything. That's absolutely fine. From a sort of advice and guidance point of view, as I say, there is, access to our details you have, and you'll get access to those in the presentations after the session as well. Who's come off mute? Has anybody come off mute? Speak? No, just the two guys.
I did anticipation.
So did I.
Anticipation of all the questions that were about to flood in.
Very quiet audience there.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a full participation in the poll. So if anybody hasn't had a chance to complete the poll of do you have insurance, it'd help us to understand a little bit more. But as I say, the three fundamentally go hand in hand: the human side plus the technology, and then the protection for recovery as well. It sounds, some of the elements of that were quite technical, but the important thing is to really tap into your contacts, your networks, and have those conversations and find out what it is that you need to be protecting. Okay. Sorry, I can hear somebody, but I can't. Luke, I can only just hear you. Could you come a little bit closer to the mic, please?
My bad. Sorry, is that any better?
Not really.
Yeah. Okay. I'll translate because I can hear that loud and clear.
That's better. Yeah. Luke?
Yeah, I'm going to try and change to a different mic.
Perfect.
Sorry about this.
I can hear you nice and clearly now. Perfect.
Okay. No, it's just going back to your original point earlier on about the insider threat. I think people have probably got different experiences with the insider threat. I'm just keen to know that 66%, does that, from your research, account for the main number of attacks or sources of compromise or data loss, and where have those stats come from?
So yeah, I can share the report. It was a report that was only launched about 3-4 weeks ago. So I should really know my sources, shouldn't I? So yeah, and it's based on that's insider threat. So that's anybody that you've given direct access to your system. So again, that includes your employees, your contractors, and anybody with authorized access to your data or your systems is what that 66% accounts to. And
is there a breakdown on that, on the ratio of what is either inadvertent, negligence, or deliberate insider threat activity?
There is, yeah. Let me find a copy of the report and I'll share it in the chat if I can, Luke, because it does break it down into a little bit more detail. But I think what's quite important there is the areas that were covered in terms of from the insurance side of what they're covering is that they are pretty much the core categories. It's just the percentage split. And I think the other thing to be mindful of in terms of insider threat and the risk, it's very much dependent on the industry. So what you have in sort of the financial sectors, it's very much the possibility or the likelihood of fraud and things like that. Whereas for a lot of the tech companies and the business support organizations, it's more likely to be around IP and the transfer of information. So the salespeople transferring that data. And I think, you obviously saw probably about 4 weeks ago, was it, where you had the breach of the former Google employee taking the IP with them to Uber. That's a massive case, but that happens on a regular basis for a lot of smaller IT companies that aren't, as established as the likes of Google and Uber that make the news.
Yeah, no, that's it. Thanks very much, Mel. It's more from interest sake. I think because we're a managed security services provider, and overwhelmingly it's been inadvertent. We haven't seen anything deliberate at all. Not to say we haven't detected it. It's just that it's been I think we're double figures now with major incidents that we've seen since COVID, and all of them have been phishing born, and all have been social engineering driven.
Yeah, so for those of you who couldn't quite hear sort of Luke there, he was talking about most of the threats that they're seeing is the social engineering aspect. So people fraudulently pretending to be other people and clicking on malicious links and emails, and that is by far, and it still retains that way, and that 66% again accounts for people clicking on social engineering attacks and their behavior related to that. So yeah, it still represents one of the biggest threats to organizations. And obviously you've got your technical controls you can do for phishing, but also the people-based educational tools. And I think that one of the key things, if it sounds too good to be true, or if you don't know the sender, they're the 2 alarm bells that you need to sort of raise in your employees' heads. Sorry, Luke, like I say, your audio is a little bit broken up, but I hope we got the gist of that. But yeah, I'll certainly share that report. Okay. Any other questions at all, or any other feedback? We're dwindling in numbers. It's getting close to the end of the day here. Chris, how did you find that? A couple of Chris's. Well,
You're another Chris.
Yeah, Chris. Hi there.
Yeah, hey. I wasn't sure if I was the only Chris. Yeah, a little unusual for me. I'm an academic, so wasn't exactly sure what to expect from all this. But it's interesting to see, I suppose, the challenges that you're facing in your different organizations, especially as a result of the current situation of COVID. So hearing more about exactly how individuals are working from home and how you meet that challenge is certainly something I think might be interesting from an academic perspective.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. And one of the things we're hoping to do is taking my Bob's business hat off and putting the YCSE hat on is looking at how we can get more presentations from other member organisations and working out how they team together to offer complementary support services to different sectors to different industries and business communities. So the first of many more sort of sessions that we're hopefully going to run just with information sharing and trying to get information out to the business community. So again, some of it may be relevant, but all elements recorded, so you can chop out the bits that aren't relevant. Okay, but thank you very much for bearing with us today. And say if anybody wants any more details on educational packages, on tech support, or on the insurances, please reach out. If you want to do it via the YCSE email address or myself, and I can share those details with you. But as I say, a copy of the presentation will come to you after the session. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining.